Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I am truly humbled to have been given the opportunity to speak to all of you here today as we collectively gather to honor our nation's fallen. And I know the national celebration of Memorial Day is still about 10 days off, but I think it's appropriate that during Warriors and Quiet Waters Legacy Day that we stop, pause, and reflect upon all those folks who went before us and sacrificed themselves so we could be here today. And as I thought about what I was going to say to all of you here, my mind went back to an event that happened to me in 2003. It was in that year that my wife's uncle, Tony Brown, was coming to town. I was stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and I was freshly back from my second or so tour to Iraq and Afghanistan, and Tony was coming down to see us. But he had an ulterior motive because there was actually a reunion that was taking place in Fayetteville that he was coming in for. He was a very humble guy. But Tony had been a glider pilot in the Second World War. And those of you that know that that was an incredibly dangerous job. And the glider pilots were having a reunion there in Fayetteville. Pretty remarkable. And Tony had invited us to be his guest of honor, which I thought was patently ridiculous for World War II vets to be asking us to be his honored guests. And so I did like any of us here would do. I jumped at the opportunity to go. So that night, I found myself in a room surrounded by more than 30 of these great heroes of the Second World War. And I think I did what all of us would do. I kept my mouth shut and I opened my ears and I listened. And what I heard that night had a profound impact on me, an impact that has stayed with me since that day, and which I will carry for the rest of my life. You see, we were sitting at a table with 6 of them. And what I heard that night were stories. I heard stories of heroism, of valor on distant battlefields, of men staring down impossible odds in the face of uncertainty. And so many of them sacrificing themselves for their nation. I heard of a purpose, this idea that they were saving the world, and they were saving the world, and they knew it, and how much that mattered to them. And each one of those men, in turn, was brought to tears that night by his remembrance of that particular period of time. You see, 60 years after the fact, after raising families, after going to college, some of them going to work, some of them, quite frankly, getting lost for a few years, having children, grandchildren, many cases great-grandchildren, the memories of that war were as if only yesterday. And I think that speaks volumes about what folks know as the soldier's burden, that weight that's carried by those who have experienced warfare. But I watched something else happen that night, something that I would say was miraculous. All these folks who came in, they were octogenarians. For us Army folks, that means 80-somethings, right? They came in with canes, and they came in pushing walkers. But somehow when they were at the table, they sat up a little bit straighter. They laughed a little bit deeper. They were with their team. They were with their people. They were with their tribe. They didn't have a Warriors and Quiet Waters in their time to help them navigate that terrain. And then the music started playing. And canes were leaned up against our table. And walkers were pushed in the corner. And I watched these great heroes get up and start dancing with the exuberance of 20-year-olds. It was a magical transformation. And everyone else that was there kind of faded to the background. It was about them, and they were safe, and they were with their people. And that spoke volumes to me. All of them are gone now. And it's up to us to continue the legacy that they left us. And the thing that I took away more than most of all that was put out that night was the idea of how they remembered their fallen. You see, they didn't talk just about what happened on a battlefield. They talked about who those people were. And that stuck with me. You see, the more I thought about Memorial Day, the more I've come to the realization that it's about the stories of our fallen. It has to be about more than a name etched in stone and just a date. It's a love story. It's about love of family. It's about love of freedom. It's about love of teammates. It's a love story between a nation and those that would defend her. It's a love story that's written in a book that's made out of marble and granite, with hundreds of thousands of pages numbered by small white headstones in places like Arlington National Cemetery and cemeteries around the world, at memorials like the one we have here, the Warriors in Quiet Waters. It's the story that tells us about a people, about a country, and if we will just listen to it, we will learn what it truly means to be an American. In that book, you would hear stories or read stories about so many of my friends. You would read the story of the Croatian sensation, Ivica Đurack. Ivica was from Yugoslavia. And funny, I have to share some of this with you, but in the unit we were in at the time, you had to have a nickname, right? Everybody had to have a nickname, so we would use that when we were in training. And Ivica didn't have one as he came in, and Croatian sensation is entirely too long. So I gave him the nickname of Pizza, which he absolutely hated. And if you can imagine, Ivica Đurack, when we would do official training events, you had to introduce yourself with your nickname. And he would get up with that thick Yugoslavian accent and say, "My name is Ivica, code the name of Pizza." And it looked like he bit an onion, right? Because he absolutely hated it, which told me that I had chosen the correct nickname for Ivica Đurack. But Ivica grew up in Yugoslavia under the tyranny of communism. In fact, he had been conscripted in the Yugoslavian army as it faced it off against us, against the West during the Cold War, allied with the Soviet Union. But all the while, in Ivica's heart, there was an ember of freedom burning. So he escaped that place and he made his way to America. And like the tens of thousands of people who come here every year, he could have disappeared in the fabric of this nation. But that's not the choice he made. He chose to serve it. And he chose to serve it with a zeal that can only be understood by someone who's grown up outside of freedom's light. To that end, he joined the United States Army, he volunteered to be a Green Beret, and he volunteered again to be in a special missions unit in JSOC. And in 2005, on a distant battlefield in Iraq, side by side with his teammates, Ivica Đurack laid down his life. For you, for me, for us. What an American story. What a story of a hero. That book would go on to tell you the story of so many more, but another dear friend of mine, Wild Bill Chief Carlson. Our nicknames were not politically correct, okay? And he selected this one, so before you come after me for it. But Chief was a proud son of the Blackfeet Nation. He was part of the Siksika clan, which is a big deal in Blackfeet tribe. As a Native American, he had more reason than most not to trust this nation, but he loved it. It was Bill Carlson who taught me that Native Americans serve in the United States military at a rate proportionally higher than any other ethnicity in this country, something I didn't know. He modeled what it looked like to be a good father, to be a good husband, and to balance that. He taught me so much, and he was probably the toughest person I've ever met in my life. Bill Carlson gave his life up in 2003 on a battlefield in Afghanistan. And as his last act of devotion to his teammates, Bill Carlson's unit came under an ambush. His vehicle was hit with an RPG. He knew where the machine gun fire was coming from, and he angled his vehicle towards that machine gun fire, placing himself as the driver between the machine guns and the rest of his team. And they all got out, and Chief didn't. That's an American story, the most American of stories. That's the story of a hero. And that book will go on to tell you of people from poverty, of people from privilege, people from the inner cities of this great country, folks from the farms and the ranches of the heartland, people from every walk of life and every ethnicity, bound together in eternity but by a desire to defend this amazing multicolored tapestry that is the United States of America. They went by names that you're not going to find on any monument. Names like Putty, Taz, Rabbit, Wheels, and Pizza. But other names like son, daughter, mama, and daddy. They were husbands, fathers, sons, and brothers, wives, daughters, sisters, and mothers. They truly were the very best of us. So as Memorial Day comes around every year, I ask you to grill those hamburgers, cook those hot dogs up, spend time with your family and friends, and enjoy it, because that's what they would have wanted. That's what they sacrificed for. But I ask you to learn the stories of those that have gone before us and share them with all who will listen. It's the story of a nation. It's the story of a people. It's an American story, and it was written by heroes. I'm going to leave you today with an excerpt from a poem that was written a long time ago in 1914 by a guy named Lawrence Binyon. Lawrence Binyon was a Brit, and the Great War had just kicked off, the First World War. And it's a pretty famous poem, and it's long, and I would commend that if you haven't read it before, it's worth reading this poem. But he couldn't serve. And it was his way of describing how he felt about those who were forward and how he felt about those who had sacrificed everything. They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. May God bless the memory of all of our fallen heroes. May God bless the incredible work this organization does and the veterans who have gone through so much for all of us. And may God bless this great country of ours. Continue to bless. Warriors first always. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.